Over the past year and a half, we have talked about a lot of things, from arguments for God's existence to arguments against God's existence, from the evidence for Jesus' resurrection to the shortcomings of his followers today. We've interviewed pastors and priests. We've attended many different types of churches. We've talked about theology, philosophy, and politics. And today, our conversations on this podcast come to an end. Join us as we take a moment to look back on this journey, as well as to look forward to what's next. Hey, I'm Bailey.
I'm Michael.
And I'm David.
And welcome back to the Facing the Gates podcast. That's the last time that I will be saying that.
God, it's so weird. It
is weird. We've been doing this show since, I think, October of 2020. I think the first episode came out in November. So it's pretty surreal. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's been so... It doesn't feel like it's been a long time, but at the same time, it almost feels like it's been a really long time. Does that make sense? It's kind of in between. It's a weird point.
It's like leaving high school going, God.
Yeah.
Was I here that long?
Yeah.
Parts of it felt like forever, but parts of it feels like it just flew by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
crazy.
I think kind of just to start things off, I might want to go ahead and answer the question that might be on everyone's mind if we haven't already answered it enough. And that is, why is the show ending? So there's a few different answers and takes on this. And part of it is each episode we've covered a pretty big topic. And, in order to ensure quality over quantity, we've decided to quit while we're ahead. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, like, sort of kidding, but in all seriousness, the show was never really meant to go on forever. We feel it is best to end the show now that we've covered just about everything that we set out to cover in the first place. Also, my knowledge is quite limited, and we've just about hit the threshold of what I have to offer here. So yeah, that's the main thing. There were also some canceled episodes, but the main reason we chose to cancel them was because we didn't feel like we had enough to talk about with regard to whatever that particular topic was. So, for example, I'm thinking of the transcendent aspect of music was an episode that got canceled. It sounds like a good title, but we just didn't really have enough to say on the topic to fill out an entire episode. And then other episodes were actually merged into one. So, for example, nihilism, suicide, and the meaning of life were all originally separate episodes, but we kind of condensed them into one episode. But we go ahead.
And then other episodes that we thought about doing, we both felt like we didn't have enough to say just on that topic. And we've also, it's an overarching theme within subtopics that we've covered. Like with the music, we've covered part of that already.
Right.
And like we had one where we were going to look at poverty, which is a very abstract, thing, but that's encapsulated in our political series and even in parts of the religious series.
Yeah. So just in general, we kind of started the show to kind of peel back the curtain here a little bit. When we started this show, we kind of just started brainstorming topics for episodes and just, word vomited them into a long list. And as time went on, as the show concept became a little bit more concrete and we started kind of directing the order of each episode in the series and kind of organizing things a little bit better, some of these episodes began to sort themselves into particular series and themes, and that's why we've done the episodes in kind of like a group. Like, you know, we did this series of arguments for God's existence, for example, because there were episodes that neatly fit into that category. And there's a couple episodes that were one-offs that we did throughout the series. But in general, we also wanted to keep in mind the overarching flow and narrative of the show, so that each episode kind of segued and made sense in terms of the order that we recorded them in. Plus, it was kind of intended for people to listen from the beginning. Actually, initially, I wanted it to be people listen to our first 3 episodes where we interviewed each other, and then they could jump into any episode and just kind of have that basic knowledge and use that for any episode. But really, as things went on, our conversations built on previous conversations, and we would constantly reference older episodes. And so I think now, looking back, it makes much more sense, if you're going to listen to the show, then just listen to it from the beginning and listen to all of them.
Mm-hmm. And then comes like the visiting churches and interviewing pastors and stuff, because it was like, oh, this would be a cool idea, but this kind of global situation happened. Don't know how that will complicate it. And thankfully, we were able to go and experience that. And then it's like, oh, politics.
Yeah, because when like I pitched that to you, it was more like hey, this would be dope if we could do one.
Yeah.
And this fucker here pulls up with a list. Like, I've emailed all of these. Do you guys have any ones that you guys would like to visit? Any certain? Yeah. And like, we threw them in there, and some got back, some didn't. And really, I agree that at first we wanted to have like those base 3 episodes, but we've grown and progressed so much. Our whole lives are different now. Yeah. And it doesn't make sense to just kind of skip around, because you get to see both our personal growth and also the different way that we tackle these things now. Because we first started, I would get off work, I'd come home, crack a beer, grab some pizza, smoke a joint, and we're off the recording. Whereas now it's a lot more planned. We set time aside out of our days. It's the spur of the moment, and more of we've been thinking about this.
Right. Yeah. And also, I just want to echo the same point I made earlier, that, you know, the topics we cover are not small topics. And we released episodes, generally speaking, on a weekly basis. And so one week we're talking about morality and the grounding of this really big philosophical topic. And another week we're talking about suicide, nihilism, and the meaning of life. And like, these are big topics. Each episode is such a big topic. You're going to run out of those big topics eventually. And just to kind of, we set out what we intended to do with the show when we started it. And we wanted to end it on a good note once we've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to cover. We've done over 60 episodes. I think this is going to be episode 63 when this goes out.
Yeah, over a terabyte of raw files.
Yeah, we've covered everything that we want to cover. And really, if we were to continue doing things, it wouldn't really fit with the flow of our conversations. There would be just kind of a bunch of random one-off things, and there might be some things that we may not have really fleshed out or thought out opinions on. And so really, we just decided, and just also like our personal lives, like, it just makes more sense to end it at this point. So anyway,
kind of closing that chapter and moving forward, because I mean, we don't live in the same place anymore. We don't have the same jobs that we had, well, except for David, but even he's looking forward to the future. And it's just getting harder to plan and put all this together, especially on your plate. I mean, you do the editing, you do all that. I'm just here with a fucking microphone and nothing else to do.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and like, I would do the uploading, but you have the editing skills, to say the least.
It's honestly not. It's just a preset, so it's not really all that special.
But you made
it doesn't
the
take
presets
long
and stuff.
Yeah, it's
And the
more. Yeah, it's more elbow grease to get it set up so that you could, But like once I've got the initial stuff done, like all the audio presets that I slap on, really all I'm doing is at this point is syncing things and cutting things out, and it takes like no time at all. The more
Don't sell
work
yourself
is
short,
like,
kid.
do it now.
Don't sell yourself short. I mean, you kind of the
Well,
brains of this whole operation here.
I'm saying like the editing process is the easy part. The more time consuming process is making social media posts or actually planning the content of the episodes. That by far took the most time.
And the research.
And
Yeah, I dealt with more of the hardware stuff, or like, oh, Reaper's being weird. Let me fix this.
yeah. So one other thing I wanted to add, just before we forget this, this show definitely will continue to exist on the podcast platform providers that you're listening to it on. More than likely, if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Pandora or any of the other podcast platforms, we are going to keep this up on. We're going to continue to have this on those platforms. However, there may be a time in the future where we decide to pull it down, because to kind of some behind the scenes here for people who didn't know, in order to get a podcast out, you're paying a podcast provider to distribute it, and essentially you're paying them to store your podcast on a server somewhere.
And to do all the legwork of dealing with the, say, like Spotify and stuff, because I mean, I know from the independent music scene, it's a pain to get your stuff on there sometimes.
Yeah, so essentially, we will still be paying to keep the podcast up, and there might be a point in time where we decide that is not really worth it anymore. We do know for sure we're going to keep it up for at least another year, because we can kind of put it on an archive plan and it won't be quite as expensive. We just won't be able to upload anymore, which is fine because this is our last episode anyway. But in the event that happens, this show will remain available on YouTube. So Facing the Gates is on YouTube. We upload it there manually. So if you ever want to go back and listen to these episodes and it just doesn't happen to be on a podcast provider, you'll have the YouTube to listen to it on. Now, granted, if you're listening to this on a podcast provider, it's not taken down at this point in time, obviously. But so you know, for the future, that's where it will be for sure, forever, probably.
And if you happen to stumble upon this on YouTube in 15 years, because YouTube will probably still be the devil that it is.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
How did you come across this?
How is you just
archive.org?
Yeah.
Is this part of the algorithm?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, now that we've got all that nice maintenance stuff out of the way, I'd like to kind of go into some reflection on the show and ask a couple questions and, get some thoughts. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is what have been some of your favorite moments from recording this show over the past year and a half?
Oh, well, one of the most, in hindsight, recent ones was our unexpectedly long episode about ghosts and aliens, and just me and you bouncing off each other. Mm-hmm. That was a hoot. And honestly, my favorites all are the interviews. Bar none. As much as I love talking with you guys, I feel that's kind of when we stepped our game up. When we started that whole series, that's when the commitment became more than just, we're going to just meet up on Saturday, record a little bit. Here's some notes I took. Here's some notes I took. Let's just spitball. Yeah. That's where it became even more of a production than just three dudes in a hot, sweaty ass room drinking till midnight, knowing one has to be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
That's kind of when we started taking this shit a little more serious.
We got preamps for all of our mics have preamps and stuff.
Yeah.
So even on like the hardware side, up-to-date interface, preamps, more cables, more mic stands.
Yeah.
I bought a pop filter. I mean, bro, that's when we really started taking this shit serious.
Yeah.
But also, kind of a side note, one of my favorite parts is watching how we've all grown. Like, I know it's abstract, but like, we're totally different people than when we started. We've been through life. We've all started jobs, left jobs, met new people. Me and you moved.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of just the progression of our life. And still, throughout all that, having this kind of unifying bond through this podcast and through these conversations that we plan. And sometimes life got in the way. But even throughout all that, this has kind of stayed a cornerstone of what we do and who we are. And that's kind of beautiful. And that's kind of one of my favorite things is watching your transition to orthodoxy, watching David's transition and growth as who he is. And I mean, that's by far my favorite part.
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of an abstract thing to say, but it is. Like,
no, actually, I would second that. Because I have three things. One of them, at least that I wrote down, one of them was, I would say, watching the evolution of Michael unfold before my eyes. Because if you look back at, the early episodes, you were kind of either I don't know or loud and ignorant. And it just kind of depended on the day what we would get.
Sometimes both.
Sometimes
special.
both. But then as time has progressed, you become way more like nuanced and I don't know, just you've made a lot of changes in your life and I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, when we started this podcast, I was in a really dark, deep place. And thanks to the things that have happened in life, like my partner, I've managed to be able to get out of that and kind of see the light a little bit and make changes that I knew I needed to make in my life, like getting out of my hometown, quitting the constant drinking and smoking and all that, and allow myself to grow more than I am. Because I'm still ignorant, I'm still loud, and there's a lot I still don't know. But I'm allowing myself to become more nuanced and to learn more things and to just have a better appreciation for life as a whole. And part of that progression is these conversations.
Yeah.
And these experiences.
Yeah. I would also second when you said visiting the different types of churches and speaking with their pastors. That by far was my favorite series that we've done. It was a very fulfilling and enjoyable part of this show. And I think that's one of the things that I will always remember basically for the rest of my life. Like that period of time where we were like for 2 months, it was very grueling. Like we would get up and go do an interview on Saturday, come back and talk for a little bit, go home, sleep, and then go back to church
at 11 Sunday night.
Yeah, and then we would go to church and then we would talk about it and then we would go home and then David had to go to work, and so it was a very hectic, like brief period of time, but it was worth it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, heck, the last church we went to, we got stuck in traffic for like 3 hours, and it's a 1 hour trip, and we're all crammed. Granted, you don't have a tiny car, but we're all crammed in this car, and I can imagine you guys are ready to choke me as I was ready to choke y'all because we all wanted to just get home.
We sang 99 bottles of beer on the wall and got all the way through it.
Y'all two
like
did
several times.
This is maddening.
Yeah,
but we were still recorded. It was still as long as the others, if not maybe a little bit longer, and I got like an hour and a half. Ooh, that was a fun time.
One other moment that I will always cherish is Michael's rant about simulation theory.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's still there, baby, because I still feel the same way.
It's so good.
Yeah, because also, you and I were like, it's stupid, but it comes from pop culture. Michael just went off.
Yeah, and another thing that I always appreciate, and this is our conversations we had off mic, like when me and you you drove what, 2.5 hours to go visit our mother of the Rosary. Me and you in the car just talking, and when we get to the hotel after the interview, just sitting on that porch and just talking about life and
that was a lot of fun,
aspirations, honestly. And really getting to those deeper conversations. Yeah. And those are things that I think we'll all be able to look back upon and go, life might have not been the greatest all around, but those are bright spots.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, just because, that was a good example, but just in general, we just talk a lot and we have the conversations that are on air, but we also have a lot of conversations that aren't on air, and maybe it's facing the gates after dark-esque conversations, but, we always have good and deep and interesting conversations whenever we talk about these kinds of topics.
Yeah. Sometimes it could go from nowhere. We're playing a video game and it's like, oh, here it comes.
And then we're talking about the human condition for 3 hours.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So do we have any other favorite moments?
I think kind of overall, just seeing a project actually fruit and become something more than I did, because Bailey, you and I definitely have experiences. You have a cool idea, you try to make it work, it just doesn't work out between logistics, between people and stuff like that. It just dies on the cutting room floor. But to see something and actually have it come
to fruition and be long-term, a full-on show, and
it's like, okay, this is cool. This is kind of fulfilling in a way.
Yeah.
As Marx would say, seeing the whole chair get built.
Yeah. I would say all the times we've heard gunshots and had to pause, whether that's in the middle of interviews or sitting at the house me and David lived at in David's bedroom, and we were pop, 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 pop. And I just reached over, grabbed my pistol, go, not today, motherfuckers.
Yeah. Since you moved, it's been pretty much dead quiet. Just the loud trucks.
They're not after you anymore. Or maybe whoever they were after got shot. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, man, there's been so many little moments that we might not think of now, but we'll think of in 5 years and go, damn, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So what have been the pros and cons of doing a podcast like this? What do you guys think?
Pros, you get to hang out with the boys late, have interesting discussions, learn about yourself and those you hold close around you. And me personally, it was part of what helped me transition to my current situation in life. I mean, if it wasn't for the interviewing with the pastors and visiting churches, I would have still been working 5 days a week, working myself to death. That made me make a change for the better, in my opinion, because I went to work as like, I need these days off. I can't do this anymore. And looking at it, even if the podcast wasn't there, it's a change I needed to make.
Yeah.
And it kind of opened up a lot of avenues and made me really contemplate where I was at and what I wanted and what I needed and what my obligations were.
Right.
So those are my pros. My cons, let me get to them. Spent a lot of fucking time existentially thinking about everything. All right, it's going to happen. And you spend a lot of time researching both your point and the opposite point. And if you don't have shit to say. Sometimes we might not want to record, but fuck it, we're recording. Mm-hmm. There's been many, many days I would come home and be like, dude, I'm just so fucking tired. Give me 10 minutes. I need to get myself together. And we would record till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then there were times where we woke up at 6 o'clock in the fucking morning, ready to go to interview.
Yeah.
Or getting ourselves ready to go to church. But
yeah,
as much as that is a con, that also showed that this was more than just a flash in the pan type thing, that there was passion behind this. We all wanted to do this. And I know we all hit burnout at some point through this.
Yeah.
And that's another con. You're going to get burnt the fuck out if you don't pace yourself. And at first, I don't think we paced ourselves well. We just kind of jumped head in.
Yeah.
And we learned that we needed to have a backlog, to take some time off, to really think, to give you guys the best show we could.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to count out that burnout, you won't finish. And I got to give props to David for the hardware side, the tech side, Bailey for setting all this shit up, taking time out of your busy schedule, planning all this out, giving outlines, being the hub of communication, getting the interview set up, and making this harebrained idea we had one drunken night playing video games, hanging out, into something.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, I have like two main pros and two main cons. The pros would be we get to have very specific topic-oriented conversations and are forced to not go too far off topic. Because if we were to have these conversations in a non-podcast, non-organized way, we would talk about one thing and then we'd segue into something else and then be something else and it'd be something else. This podcast has forced us to stay on topic and not go too far off topic because that's in the title. What's in the title is what we're talking about. And sometimes we go off on tangents, but for the most part, we stayed on topic.
Yeah, we're all ramblers.
Yeah.
Like, especially me and Bailey. You guys know I'll get on tangents. Bailey has especially started getting on tangents.
Yeah.
And when we would personally talk about these things, we'd be talking about God and the meaning of life and then be talking about why this is bullshit in the media.
Yeah, so we would kind of go all over the place.
I would agree, being able to keep all this very clear and concise and kind of sticking to the script when we needed to. I didn't think of that con, but that is a very good point.
Yeah. So the other pro I would say is just in general, learning and understanding more about one another, because I think there's probably a couple things we've learned since we started this show. Yeah. The cons, and I kind of mentioned this one earlier, was it got a little bit grindy at times. So, I mean, obviously, again, we do this in our spare time. This isn't our full-time job. There were times like over the summer or in recent months where, you know, it seems like we lived and breathed the podcast, and it, you know, like Michael said, there are some times where we just maybe didn't want to record the podcast, but we kind of had to because they need, you know, episodes needed to go out, conversations needed to be had. And then the other con, which is sort of a con, is on my end having to do a lot of research and put it all together. That all ended up being a lot of work for me, a lot more than I kind of anticipated going into it. Now, fortunately, there was a lot of downtime with the job that I had when I started this show. So I kind of just ended up working on the podcast at work, and that worked out. But eventually I didn't have that job anymore, and we had big topics to cover. And thankfully, I had worked so far ahead that I had gotten through like the politics series. But some of these episodes towards the end here, like I basically just made these 3 outlines for these 3 episodes and my notes for all of them this past week. And it's kind of a lot of work to do that when you're working a full-time job and, you know, you have other life obligations. However, while there were those cons, and while it was hectic at times, I'm thankful we did it.
Yeah. I mean, that's like with the CRT one. I was like, I'm not prepared. I have research and life's been hectic, and I don't feel what I have prepared will be adequate. And there's been times where we've just had to say that episode can wait a week.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you're not going to feel good about what you put forward, is it worth doing? And that's something we've kind of learned as we've went, because we started taking this a lot more seriously. I think all 3 of us have, as we've furthered our stances and grown, and we care about the product we're putting forward and the discussions being had.
Yeah. What about you, David?
Yeah. I think y'all touched on the core pros and cons. And I think one con I personally, especially for those who don't know, to kind of alleviate a lot of burnout, we would record sometimes more than one episode, or if things were going well, maybe more than two. Who knows? But
like today, we're recording 3.
Yeah. But for me, kind of a con, just personally, since I work night shift, I'm a night person. Like, for example, I've been awake since about 6 o'clock yesterday.
Oof.
Yeah, but the pro to it is
David really is taking it for the team.
I guess you could say that.
I mean, hey, we used to
we all
record
make
when I got off
sacrifices.
working 8 hours
Yeah.
manual labor, so
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me being soft-spoken, at the end my voice does get a little sore, so I gotta
Drink water.
Well, yeah,
Drink
not
water.
beer or soda.
but
Drink water.
kind of just rest my voice until work where I have to answer the phone.
Yeah.
And
Well, I did YouTube. I did a gaming YouTube channel for like 9 years, so my voice is used to yelling. So I'm pretty good. I mean, I'm looking at the Skype call right now. We've been on this call for 6.5 hours today,
Mhm.
and we just started this episode. So thankfully my voice is all right.
Yeah, I worked hospitality as a front-facing position, covering anything from maintenance to front desk to housekeeping to managerial roles. I can talk, and I've always been a talker. I'm a
Yeah.
bullshitter, so fuck with me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where I'm not, and my hospitality-facing voice is higher pitch for some reason. So it's like I gotta really not overstress, or I'm just gonna lose my voice at work. But yeah,
Gotcha.
other than that, we talked about the kind of logistical issues we had as the cons, but as kind of y'all said, being able to have more kind of specific, detailed conversations and get to flesh out ideas, or sometimes even learn stuff on topics that we might have not known. And being able to kind of, like, for example, with the CRT stuff, I remembered about redlining and the history behind that, but I forgot. I'm like, okay, well, what's the source? And I remembered, oh yeah, this one source which led to 3, which led to the law review, and kind of being able to think both on the fly but prepare yourself at the same time is a pro to it. Kind of flexes those muscles.
Yeah.
Because I will say a lot of episodes, I would come prepared with something, Bailey would come prepared, David would come prepared, but that doesn't, we didn't rehearse any of this. Like sometimes Bailey would give a general outline, and sometimes there was no outline. So if something pops up on the fly, we just have to kind of on the spot think about it for a second. And if we feel comfortable, speak on it. And if not, we would just say, I need to do more research.
Yeah.
But it really did flex the improv muscles and kind of I'd say we've gotten better with timing as we've progressed. We still have hiccups where, especially since we're digital now, where we might step on each other. But I think that's just growing pains of doing something like this.
Yeah. So kind of expanding on David's point about, like, learning things. What are some of the things that we've learned through doing this?
I've learned a lot more about different denominations or traditions. I've learned more about where I stand kind of in this world we're in. And I've learned a lot more about myself than I thought I would. But I think that's true for any of us here. I think we could all agree we've learned a lot, both about each other, but also ourselves. And we've kind of broadened our horizons of what we see as religion. And we've learned a lot of the historical context that goes forward, especially speaking to brilliant people. And I say brilliant as intelligent. like Father Mark, Father Dwight, Pastor John, Pastor Kendall. We've talked to so many other, Pastor Trent, intelligent people, and that's really expanded our horizons of what we know and also helped fill in the gaps of, I know a little about this, but I now know a lot more, like with the iconography and all of that.
Or like the history of the Anglican.
Yeah, the history of the Anglican Church. I knew about how Protestants came about, but I've learned more about the different schools of thought in Protestantism and the different denominations, and I've learned a fucking lot.
Yeah.
And learned more about each other's like personal histories. Like we've talked about the ghost hunting stuff and the supernatural, but we really dug our claws in and learned a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's hard to list everything we've learned, but I would say that covers a good broad spectrum of what we learned, at least in my eyes.
Gotcha. What about you, David?
Yeah. I mean, something besides just doing Michael's list again, because I think we can all agree upon that. Another thing, maybe not necessarily learned, but kind of reinstated for myself is, as what we said for the final kind of politics thing, in the kind of person where everyone's not so far different, everyone's not so far kind of separated. Even though we might have different religious views, we still hold, say, things like community and kind of helping each other out to a similar level.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things that I've learned. For one, people can be very complex. And I feel like, kind of before in my, I guess maybe insular bubble of Christianity, like there's kind of stereotypes of, atheists or agnostics. And you guys are definitely not the stereotypes of those things. They exist. There's a reason those stereotypes exist, but you guys aren't it.
People are mad I'm not the super angry atheist, but I could never be. I know sometimes like I had to play like, well, some atheists think this way, and it's like, but I'm just like.
Another thing I learned was that I don't know how to utilize social media for podcast marketing. You could probably kind of see like a demarcation point in our social media posts where I just kind of stopped trying, because like I would make like basically Monday was always the social post for the release of the episode. Wednesday is usually a question about that episode, and then Friday is usually some kind of meme. And I didn't always have that format. I was kind of trying to make sure like the Wednesday and Friday posts were always different, but that required a lot of work and time and thinking, and I stopped caring about it after a while. And also I stopped doing hashtags after a while, because like on Instagram, that's how you get your posts out there, right? That's how you are promoted through the algorithm. I stopped doing that because we would basically just get trolls commenting on those posts and not actually listen to the original content that they were referring to. And so I got tired of responding to these random people that are responding to a very short social media post, which is referring to the podcast, and they're not even listening to the podcast. And so, I mean, that also reflected in the fact that we didn't grow on social media all that much after that point. And it just goes to show I don't really understand social media, and I don't really care enough to do it. So that's,
we check our politics while us complain about social media.
Yeah. Like I haven't used social media in so long. I'm off of Twitter. I still have a Twitter account, but I might pop on there once every couple weeks.
Yeah.
But I don't have a Facebook. I don't have an Instagram. I know Bailey is mostly off with social media. David has never been big on social media. I think he's the biggest user of it right now out of all three of us.
And I don't even check it. But like,
we became so jaded and dejected with how social media goes.
Yeah.
on our
But I mean, that's
own
the thing with
spectrums.
podcasting is you kind of need social media because otherwise it's not going to get promoted. I mean, you can rate podcasts, which by the way, rate our podcast. Even though it's over, give us 5-star reviews. Do it. It's awesome. But I mean, beyond that, like if you're not at the top of the charts, then people aren't going to see it. And you kind of have to rely on social media and other digital marketing for your podcast. And I don't know how to do that because I'm not good at marketing. So.
Yeah, but also that shows that this is a project out of passion. We were never in it to get famous, never in it to try to get money. We know
Right.
how hard it is to be successful in this field, and even with all the right steps, it's 1 in a billion because there's so many other people.
Yeah.
But all of this stuff comes from the heart, and that we want to have these conversations, and hopefully it helps someone out.
Yeah.
We've been in it for passion. That's what took us to all these different churches and took us to continue this thing after moving and people dying and all of that. Like, it's kind of therapeutic after a certain point because it's the constant we have with each other.
Yeah. A couple other things I learned was podcasting can be a lot of work. I didn't anticipate that going in. I kind of talked about that earlier. I didn't know as much as I thought I did. I kind of had a little bit of an ego about, and I still do, admittedly. That's something I need to work on. But actually, that's another thing is I need to work on my shortcomings. So many of the things that I've preached in various episodes of this podcast, I found were the very things that I was guilty of. I need to kind of bridge the divide between my beliefs and practices better. So this was a common occurrence. I would say something on the podcast, and then like a couple days later, I would do the thing that I was criticizing, and I'd be like, so this is what it's like to be a hypocrite. So I need to work on this. And there's a lot of things like that, just in general, that like I say, but I don't really do. And that's part of the process. I got to work on that.
Well, I think a major thing is being self-aware of it so you can correct that course. For most people don't even think about it.
Yeah. And I think that's something we've all three done on this journey is be self-aware and acknowledge our shortcomings. And I mean, I've changed so much about my life within just the past couple months that if you had told me when I started this podcast I'd be doing these things or not doing other things, I wouldn't believe it. But that's kind of the beauty of this. It makes you more self-aware, both where you stand and what you need to work on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. So, by the way, just as a side note, sorry if anyone hears Michael's cat in the background. He's kind of
Asshole.
talkative right now. Oh, that too. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to segue into is, do you have any regrets?
I think for myself, in the Q&A, actually, we talked about this a little bit with Michael's question, but especially like unfortunately missing out on some interviews or like not being able to go to the Catholic Church at all. Wish I could have been there. Kind of regret circumstances happening that made that impossible. And yeah, that's pretty much the main one for me is because like or like my internet going out and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was kind of beyond your control.
Yeah, but
obviously not the best situation.
Yeah, I did resolve it, thankfully, by learning a whole new networking type.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you go ahead, Michael.
I personally try not to have regrets because it doesn't help me progress. But if I had to go back and do it, I would have made the personal moves I did to record the interview series way sooner for myself and the health of the content, since I would, again, finish working, drive home, we'd get right to it. Or I was so pressed for time that I felt like it was more of a hindrance to the quality. And there's some things I would go back in time and be better prepared for. But that's hindsight. It's 2020. But all in all, I try not to hold any regrets about anything because it's through these experiences and things I regret that we've learned and we've grown. So it's kind of how I take it.
I have a few. So there were a few different types of churches that I actually wouldn't have mind visiting in retrospect. So like I'm thinking of Eastern Rite Catholic churches, Oriental Orthodox churches, etc. These were just kind of things that I wasn't super aware of, and I wouldn't have known had I had known that we were already drawn to the more traditional types of churches. I would have tried to make it possible that we attend more of those as well. But also, I mean, that series is already kind of long compared to everything else. So I don't think we needed to really pad that out more than it already was. But, you know, I wouldn't mind have visiting those kinds of churches. And this is kind of something I talked about a little bit last episode, but I almost regret writing scripts for each episode. It made them feel, it made a lot of them kind of feel sterile and prepackaged as opposed to a natural, organic conversation. There's obviously pros and cons to writing a script versus having an off-the-cuff conversation. My justification for why I did that is because these topics are really, really important, and I want to make sure that I kind of think about things before I say them, because if I say something off the cuff, it may not really be reflective of what I think and believe. So writing things out has given me the opportunity to, you know, write it down, look back at it, change things, come back later, and then continue that revising process. And it's been helpful in the sense that, like, it's helped me give a more well-rounded and informed opinion. However, the types of episodes that I've enjoyed most out of this show were not the ones where I've done a ton of research and I've written out my notes and everything. They were more of the kind of improvised, off-the-cuff kind of conversations. And I think that kind of shapes the type of show that we have. Like, there's definitely, you know, a certain brand of podcasts where you're learning things and it's educational and people are presenting facts and information and stuff to you. And then there's, you know, other kind of podcasts where it's just conversational between people. And I personally find myself more gravitating towards the latter of those two. I tend to prefer those kinds of podcasts, but there is merit to the other one. So, like, I kind of see why I did that, but at the same time, you know, it's not without its cons.
Yeah, but also even with the scripted parts, we knew, like, it's okay if we each have a point that comes up that's not on your script. Like, if you thought of something else, you knew it was perfectly okay to bring it up.
Right.
And we still kind of slingshotted some ideas off of each other and created hypotheticals based off that script that we might not have if we didn't have it.
Yeah. There's also, and I mentioned this last episode as well, I have also said a few stupid things over the course of this podcast, which is bound to happen if you put a mic in front of me for like 100 hours or so. So, you know, I mentioned last time that I didn't remember that Jesus ascended into heaven after his resurrection, for example. That's a pretty basic Christian belief, so it was kind of dumb of me to forget it in that episode. Kind of cringe, to be honest. But there's a few things like that. And then the last one is, I think there may have been a few times in previous episodes where I feel like I may have been a little too dogmatic and wasn't willing to listen enough. I'm thinking, like, in particular with the politics episodes, some of them. I think they were obviously good conversations, but those were episodes that I had to keep going back to before we recorded them to take out some of the dogmatic stuff and make it seem less, I don't know, just a kind of ideologically dogmatic on certain things. And so what you got is a lot more censored than it originally was. And even that was still a little, I guess, blunt at times or harsh. I mean, granted, obviously, I want to be firm and stand up for what I believe is good and true, but also I still think there were maybe a few moments where I was a little too dogmatic and wasn't willing to listen enough on those.
Yeah, it's kind of balancing being blunt with being compassionate. Kind of balance of grace.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something I think we all struggle with from time to time.
Especially modern day politics. It's messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point. One of the key points of all of this is learning how to have these discussions and hopefully helping others have these discussions. And through that, we're going to make mistakes. I've said so many stupid fucking things pre-recording and post-recording and during the recording that are too many to list. And sometimes I've been a little too aggressive at times with my viewpoints. And so I think if we all looked back and we didn't have anything to comment on or that we can say we've grown from, we wouldn't have done anything. Especially with how the length of time this has happened over. And so I think it's really a tribute to the journey that we've been on through this, that we do look back and we go, I wouldn't necessarily change it, but I've learned from it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, what will we do now that the show is over?
Me personally, I plan on landing a job soon.
Starting a farm and moving out to the countryside and getting rid of that newfangled internet and social medias.
I mean, I know someone who lives that way, and when I go out there, it's wonderful. It's quiet.
Become Amish.
No, I still want like air conditioning and stuff, but like I don't want to deal with fucking people most of the time, except when I want to, and I can just go to town for that. But me personally, I plan on hopefully landing a job soon. It's been a while. I'm on a search.
Anybody wants to hire Michael in the Atlanta area, hit him up. Hit me up on the email and I'll forward it to him.
Growing in my relationship that's been going on for almost a decade with my wonderful partner. Learning more about the city that I've moved to. I plan on reading more books, including Dr. McNair's autobiography. He was one of the astronauts who died on the Challenger. And it's a very motivating, very powerful thing that she's told me just little stories throughout it. I'm like, I need to read this. There's several scholarships with the McNair name, and study more philosophy, sociology, more politics, just learning more in general about the world and how humans go about things and how we think. You know, the things that have always interested me.
Yeah.
Maybe get back into writing in general, whether that's music, whether that's poetry, just writing to write. Something I've gotten away from due to work and obligations, but something I want to get back into. Maybe learn the guitar after having one for over a decade.
I have
2 chords and how to play some sheet music, but I don't know tabs. Maybe, hopefully starting streaming with David's help, because I am a moron with that stuff, but that's kind of tentative. Maybe not. And just enjoying life with a new view on it and a clearer mind that I haven't had as an adult due to the changes I've made, you know? So yeah, that's kind of what I plan on doing. It's very cut dry, but also a little philosophical there at the end.
Yeah. What about you, David?
Well, first off, build my tortoise room. Second off, funny you said farming, because I'm actually planning on trying different like grasses. Especially ones native to South Carolina.
Are you actually starting a farm?
Well,
he gonna grow grass.
My plan's essentially, especially if they're native to South Carolina, see which ones she can eat that's healthy for her. If she likes one, I'm trying to get the whole yard with it and just let it grow up more naturally, since the tortoise will be outside when she gets big enough to not have any predators.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about doing like especially microgreens or like leafy greens that she can eat as well. The supplement, because feed's expensive and it's better if I can be like, oh yeah, I made that. I trust that. Other than that, more like computer science stuff. Hopefully get a job in the field since it's booming. And kind of catch up on kind of stuff I haven't done in a while, like Michael music and a few things like that, but also like catching up on shows I miss and whatnot. Bands I haven't listened to.
Yeah. So for me, I know I said living on a farm. I was joking, but sort of not joking. Like I want to live a little bit more of a simpler life. Probably for the next month or two, I'll take a little bit of a break. That all being said, I am a very busy person, generally speaking, and I tend to thrive when I'm busy, just not this busy. So I'll probably take a little bit of a break, and then I'll probably get back to, doing something else. But I will obviously continue to learn and grow in my faith. I'll be reading books, attending church, and having conversations like these with other people. And one of the things that I've kind of always had on the bucket list is music. So I've, for those of you who don't know, I ran a gaming channel for about 9 years, and then I ended that in 2020. And the intent for me ending it was to pursue music a little bit more. I like to do vocals and whatnot. I like metal and do all that screamy nonsense, so that's pretty fun. But as life would have it, I managed to do a couple covers in like last year, 2021. And then, actually later in 2020, shortly after ending the YouTube channel, I started this thing called Facing the Gates podcast. And, that was not intended to be a super time-consuming thing, but as it went on, it began to be a little bit more time-consuming. And so I still had time to do covers and stuff a little bit, not a ton. But I'd like to start, like, maybe a band. I've thought about possibly joining the choir at church. But I'm also not super confident in, like, singing in front of people. So that's a tentative maybe kind of thing. I might do that. I don't know. Those are kinds of things that are potentially on the horizon for me. And kind of speaking of that, I actually did a cover of one of the hymns at church. It's called the Angelic Hymn. And essentially, because since I've moved to Nashville and I'm living in an apartment right now, and a lot of the music that I do is screaming, I can't really do that here. And a lot of my neighbors don't speak English, so I can't tell them that I'm recording or anything like that. So what I did was I went out to my car and recorded it from my car. And this hymn is basically like entirely it's entirely vocals. So I did clean singing layer vocals, and then I did the gritty vocals, and then I did screaming vocals as well. So this is all layered into one big cover. And I wanted to premiere it here on the podcast. I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to, well, you guys would be giving me your first impressions of it. And the people at home would be able to listen to it about 2 weeks before it comes out. The plan is, at this point in time, I haven't done these other mixes, but I want to do a mix where it's just the singing vocals, just the gritty vocals, and then just the screaming vocals, and then release all of them on Pascha, which is Orthodox Easter. So after recording this, I'll have a couple weeks to put together those mixes and then put them out on Pascha. But yeah, you guys want to listen to it and tell me what you think?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, here it comes. My cover of the Angelic Hymn, or the Triumphal Hymn, as it's also known. Holy, 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 Lord of Sabaoth, thoughts? What do you guys think about that?
It because backstory if people don't know, you've recorded a couple covers in my old bedroom on hot, sweaty days, and you would get so frustrated because I did not understand Reaper, and then I finally started getting it, and it flowed a lot better. So I've heard you do covers, and I'm so used to there being like a lot more like music and maybe not as many layers.
Yeah.
Or this was very much, since it is a hymn, very much more theatrical in the tone. And if I didn't pay attention to the words, I would have said it would fit in like a medieval like Disney movie of sorts. in a good way.
Okay.
And I will say when you kind of hit those like more mid guttural notes, the ones that come like from the upper part of the stomach, those really shine through really well and generally pretty well balanced with all the different layers and tones. So I enjoyed it. It's different than what you usually do. That's why it took me aback for a second.
Yeah.
A part of me wanted to start giggling like I've never heard you do something like this.
Yeah, it was definitely very different, like you said.
And a part of me is like, this would fit in a Disney movie.
And also you hearing like the a cappella vocals, like that's different than you. Like I can hear it because I can just solo, whatever cover I'm doing. But with there not being really any backing part, with the hymn just kind of being the hymn, and it's just vocals.
And it's nice because I'm not having to sit there decipher through 14 different vocal takes for the same 2 lines.
Yeah.
And me and you.
It was a nightmare comping that, dude. Because I recorded so many layers. Anyway, at the very least, there are 10 layers playing at once. At the very most, there's 24. So
it's still better than having Michael splice together 14 different takes into 10 seconds and going, okay, I like this part of this part of this part of this. Make it work.
Yeah. What do you think, David?
For me, and short guys, when I listen to music, I tend to listen to open backs for that kind of added space. Wide as fuck. Especially since, did you hard pan the bass ones?
Okay, so the way I did this is like the main melody, whatever the main one is, I centered that one. And then as the voices started adding, I would kind of pan them further out. So like, but I would alternate what I'd pan. So for example, like I would have like the screaming vocal, because it's doubled. Each line is doubled. So I would have the scream panned 10 to the left, 10 to the right. And then I would take the next clean singing vocal and pan it 20 to the left, 20 to the right. And then I would do the gritty vocal 30 to the left, 30 to the right. But except that there's a lot more layers, so it would keep going on. And usually what I would do is like I would have the screams, the lows, like furthest panned furthest from the center. Yeah,
because I noticed like kind of, I guess you could say in between where your face is and your ears, kind of as a visual representation. It's like, oh, there's a low cleans, and it's like, okay, there's some bass, and then the gutturals adding that little bit of crunch to the mix, and it's like, especially listening with open back headphones, you get that kind of spatial awareness, and that was really kind of cool to hear you doing. Since I fairly recently switched to open backs, being able to hear that and feel that. But I've always liked your lows a lot, and saying you do them cleanly, nice.
Yeah, and I also gotta say, even with these okay earbuds, this stage is really well done, and everything blended isn't quite the right word, because I can still pick out different things if I'm really listening due to my experience, like in band or critiquing music or like working with you or David on certain things throughout our lives. I can still pick it up, but if I was, not critically trying to focus on each of these layers, it blends really nicely together and creates this like again, like in a
Soundscape.
Disney,
And
in a Disney
encompassing.
movie, this encompassing cacophony of sound
Yeah.
surrounding you. So I
Yeah.
think it really shows the progress your mixing has made, especially since
Thank you.
you've started, because at first it was like, yeah, it's better than most people. Now it's like you have really experimented more and kind of found your own even more. And I'm happy to see what comes forth from it. But I will say, in the future, if you do start a band
Mm-hmm.
and you do find someone who wants to like collaborate with a different voice with these, blending that would bring this even to the next level. But I know that's outside of your realm right this moment, because
Right.
like if you could find a nice soprano or alto to complement your tenor parts,
Mm-hmm.
bro, because that's
Well-
kind of where the home of your voice stands,
Yeah.
is in that more guttural tenor style. That's where
Yeah.
like your screams really shine and all that. So I'm excited to see what comes of it, and I think this is a really neat idea, a neat little cover you did, cool little experiment,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
maybe some other people will think the same and like it.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I definitely, for a long time, this is really, I'm not gonna say it was boring, but it wasn't super interesting. But I knew it was gonna come to life once I started panning things, because that, on top of adding reverb, would make it sound so much bigger. And once I did that, I was like, oh, this sounds awesome.
Oh yeah,
I
playing
love it.
with space always adds a little more interest instead of something dead kind of between your ears. You
Yeah.
got this space that you can close your eyes and kind of imagine.
And it's also
Yeah,
not like ultra compressed at the same volume constantly, because with a lot of modern music, it's very constant at the same volume and interval.
Yeah,
of
they
things.
toss a limiter and just boost
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so
and-
that was, I wanted to try and recreate the experience of hearing this in the church, for example, because there's certain parts where they sing it a lot louder. And so I wanted to kind of emulate that in the way that I mixed it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
and
with that, say like
it's kind of the difference between like the first MP3 player you ever had me put music on for you and the cheap ass headphones we had,
Mm-hmm.
and now us as adults sitting and listening something with better gear and more critically listening at it. It's just, that's, you started at the MP3 player and you're progressing to more of the like hi-fi stuff that we all use now.
Yeah.
And,
And I'm also glad that you said that it's mixed well, because I had no idea what I was doing when I was mixing that, because there's just so many layers. But the first thing is gain staging. Like if you keep certain things at certain volumes, you're going to hear things fairly well. But then it was really just EQing out certain things. And I still kind of BS'd my way through EQing it, honestly. So I'm glad that it came out well and that you could hear the individual parts and that it also blended as a whole in general.
I mean, that's kind of how you learn, though, is especially with something as abstract as music. Sometimes you just gotta fuck around and find out,
Yeah.
and not write a stupid rap about Mario that someone didn't make a good beat to.
We're not gonna.
Yeah,
We're not gonna go back that.
yeah, I mean like fuck around and find out like a stupid recording added to a garage track.
So
Really
anyway, the
works
moral
out.
of the story is, if anyone ever doubts their abilities, just let it be known that I recorded that in my car and edited it with a bunch of free plugins and free software, so you can do anything. All right, don't give me excuses.
And also, his other covers, I want to say like 2 or 3 of them were recorded in my single wide trailer bedroom with terrible acoustics, a bunch of pillows and blankets and shit
Yep.
mounted, just creating a cacophony of softness.
Yeah,
Me not knowing anything about Reaper and
Yeah.
just kind of winging it.
Except what I gave you in a 5-minute crash course.
Not even that. I forgot that.
If anyone wants to listen to this cover, obviously it's technically not out yet. And when it comes out, there may be a few things that I tweaked that mix that I showed you guys. Because between now and the release of this cover, I want to do a couple different mixes. But you can listen to it on my YouTube channel, which is just Bailey Mullins on YouTube. And to Michael's point, the cover I did of Celestial Floods by Invent Animate, and about half of the vocals that you hear in my cover of 4D by North Lane, I recorded it at your guys' house. In the room that David is sitting in right now, I recorded those covers. So it's pretty fun. It made it harder for me and you to like record loud, ignorant shit because we don't live in the area anymore. I have people above me.
Wait, we did make an unreleased cover, American Idiot.
Oh yeah. That sucks, and that's never coming out, but it's hilarious.
Hey,
maybe one day we'll all get back together and be in Aiken at the same time and can record something, but who knows what the future holds.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about with the music stuff. Maybe, if anybody in the Nashville area wants to start a good old Christcore Orthodox band.
An Orthodox metal band.
Yeah, an Orthodox metalcore band with dubstep also, and maybe other sounds. Let me know.
You can be the non-satanic pro-Christian.
Make some white metal.
Ghost. Yeah. You'll be like the opposite of Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, let's segue back. Let's bring it back to the, podcast realm of things. Will you ever do another podcast?
I wouldn't mind doing another podcast because whether with you guys or with new people I'll meet or people I already know, I enjoy the camaraderie and have always loved listening to other people tell me about their experiences or their ideas or their beliefs and kind of spitballing and learning and growing off of each other. I mean, that was one of the only benefits of the jobs I worked. I was always front-facing, customer-facing, or I was dealing with the customer to fix problems. I've always loved and enjoyed that. So I could see myself doing something similar in the future. Maybe more casually or maybe even more intense. Who knows? Yeah. But it's going to be weird when we log off for the last time and next week we're not doing this. So
yeah, I know.
It's going to be hella weird, but it's, I would definitely do this again. I wouldn't go back and change doing it for the world. And hopefully maybe I can find another group of people, or maybe one day we all get together and go, hey, we all got some free time. Let's not do Facing the Gates, but let's do this. Or, hey, I got this creative idea. Because I think we're all creatively
inclined.
And a lot of our problems is the hardest part of doing it is just starting it.
Mm-hmm.
And we turned a drunken conversation into this whole podcast. Again, don't sell yourself short, kids. Bailey recorded that cover in his car. We recorded this on a whim.
Yeah. What about you, David?
I think for the foreseeable future, unless it's a topic that really piques my interest, probably not. But it's still not off the table. It's like, for a time being, I've done a podcast, and unless something really gets that fire going, if this is the only one I ever do, I'd be satisfied with what we've done.
Cool.
And also with everything being kind of oversaturated and stuff like that, it's like there's just so much material.
You have to be a unique voice and stand out, and have something to say, because there's just so much out there.
You can only have so many bros talk about movies and going to a party.
And you have to have actual passion. Like, don't get in, for anybody at home, don't get into this thinking you're gonna get famous, you're gonna make money.
Yeah, don't do it for those reasons. Do it because you care about it. It's the
Yeah,
same
do
advice I'd give to people wanting to start YouTube. Like, don't do it because you want to be a famous YouTuber. Do it because you actually care about making content.
Do it because you enjoy the hobby. Because at the end of the day, this has been our passion project, but also our hobby over the past almost
Year
year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, and there was so much planning that went into this before we even hit record. So,
Right. Yeah.
like, if you don't have passion and don't have something to say, don't do it.
Yeah. So for me, I would say it's kind of like both of what you guys have said. I'm not opposed to doing another podcast at some point in the future, but I have nothing planned as of now. I know that if I were to do another podcast, I'd probably do a few things differently so that it's not the same thing as this, you know? So for example, I would probably want it to be more conversational instead of overly scholarly, as some of these episodes ended up being. I would also need to come up with a different concept for a show. But I will say that Facing the Gates is definitely one of a kind. When I tell people like, hey, I'm Christian, I do a podcast with an atheist and agnostic, and we talk about religion, they're immediately intrigued because like that doesn't exist.
Then they
So I
find
think
out
we've
I'm not as edgy.
Yeah, and this is like, there's not a show out there like this that I'm aware of. So, I mean, I think we really kind of struck gold with the concept.
And I think that's kind of what got us off a lot of those interviews and really separated us from everybody else wanting to do, you know, because there's 101 better religious podcasts.
Yeah.
There's 101 better atheist podcasts. But we found a little niche, and this is a 1 in a million kind of spark. We gotta ride this and see where it takes us.
And
Because
also,
everyone is intrigued when, like, I had to tell my work, yep, I need these days off because I do a podcast.
He had a list.
Oh, what's it about? It's about religion, but you're not religious. I'm agnostic. My friend's Christian. My twin's an atheist. We all get together and convene and talk about these things. Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah, I know. Every conversation goes like that.
Yeah, and it's like, hey,
But it's
check
cool,
us
though.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, this man sent a text that was just, he wrote it down on paper the days he needed off to give to his work.
Yeah, and I told them either give me this off or I quit. You don't have other maintenance people. You don't have anyone dedicated to this job for this little bit of money, so I need these days off.
Yeah. And also, just kind of to that point, I think that I don't want to say that like it's impossible for anyone else to do this, because it totally is possible. But I think the way that we did it, given the context that we have known each other since we were small children, we grew up together.
We went to Awanas and youth together. We went to the same schools. Me and you were like best friends when you came into public school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
and just being able to, like, when we reconvened, the fact that we were basically friends for like another year prior to starting this show and doing whatever we did in our spare time to hang out, like, and we had a precedent for being able to have these conversations already. And so I feel like that dynamic has reflected in a very unique way in this podcast. Whereas if, you know, maybe there are other people that have a strong bond with people that disagree with them, but like generally that doesn't really happen. So I think like we kind of are unique in that sense.
And we're three very different people, and we've done media together. Like, you came over and we streamed every weekend for a long time, and we're all
I joined
creatively
because of
minded.
technical reasons.
Yeah.
So
but back to,
I think it was kind of a perfect storm type of deal.
Definitely. Back to like whether or not I would start another podcast. Another point is that I would also have to find someone that I would want to do a podcast with, who would also help with some of the workload, because I doubt I would do one on my own. And I also doubt that I'll be doing social media or doing the social media thing just in general, because I feel like that was a waste of time for me if we were to promote me and this other person that hypothetically existed for this podcast. If we were going to promote it, I would have to have someone else run the social media just because I don't want to do it. Would design for it, because I do graphic design, but I don't know if I would want to be coming up with the content and posting things. Because, I think I don't want to say I bit off more than I could chew with this podcast, but I definitely took more work than I thought that I would have to take starting out. I thought like, it will just be a matter of writing bullet points for these episodes, and these bullet points turned into 10-page long notes. So it kind of evolved into something that was a little bit more work than I was expecting.
Yeah, we all thought we were planting like a flower bulb, when in reality we planted a fucking tree. And we had to just ride it out. Because I don't think any of us, when we started this, would believe how far this has came and how many episodes, the interview series. All of these were just thoughts in our head, and you really pull through. And I think as the show went on, we all pulled through and we did it.
I was pretty certain, like, oh yeah, this will happen. But I didn't know, like, I was like, this is probably not going to be a super long-term thing. It'll probably be like a year or two, and it's literally in between that. So, I was definitely impressed by the fact that we were able to pull off the interview series, because I was surprised that so many of them actually got back with us and were willing to be interviewed. That was, like you said, it really took the show to another level.
Yeah, and we got new hardware and stuff to support that kind of effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, we were on the cusp of the largest pandemic to ever happen in our lifetime. Yeah. And that played a unique role in all of this. Like, perfect time. We were in the right parts of our lives for all this to line up. We emailed the right people at the right time. We got answers back. Like, so much more than just luck and chance went into it, but there was still some luck and chance that went into it.
I don't believe in luck. One might say,
but do you believe in pluck?
Well, you get the general idea of what I mean.
What is pluck?
It's
because
don't tell me. I don't care.
We could have go back in time and do this 100 times, and maybe your email goes to their spam box, or they just don't get back to you because they're busy. Like,
I had some of them that didn't.
For a reason.
I had some of them that weren't able to, So it took a little bit of work to get. Like, some places were not our first choice, but not because we didn't want them to be our first choice. I guess it's just because some people didn't get back to us, or some people weren't able to do it. It's not to throw anyone under the bus or anything, but I wanted to make sure, like, we've got these set up for like these other churches. We need these churches as well in order to get a kind of fully rounded, fully orbed perspective.
Yeah, and we managed to get two churches that we have some familial ties with. Which, if we had done the podcast a couple months earlier, we would not have talked to Pastor Kendall.
Yeah.
So I believe everything kind of worked out the way it did for a reason. We kind of hit the nail running. And again, that is in no short change. Bailey did a fuck ton of everything. Like, when I say I'm just the voice and I got some notes, like, he did the heavy lifting here. David did a lot of the tech stuff. You guys taught me how to record remotely. Like, seriously, hats off to you guys. Like, without y'all two, this shit would not have happened.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's really nice.
And looking back, I will say one thing I do regret is I wish I was comfortable enough or able to do more of the legwork. So that is one thing I do, if I went back, I would want to do, but we kind of held our little baby project in our hands, and it's a man now.
Yeah.
It can live on its own.
All right. Well, off of that answered question, I know that was probably something on a lot of people's minds. There were obviously a lot of influences going into this podcast, things that influenced our thinking, things that we've taken from others. But being that we're talking about podcasts, what are some of your top podcast recommendations for people at home who might want to, be like, oh, I like the things that Michael says. Maybe I could listen to more of things that inform his thinking. What are some recommendations you guys have for podcasts?
Honestly, most of the podcasts I listen to have nothing to do with my thoughts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the only one I've been regularly catching, well, two, because I like hearing people yell at each other in ignorance, is the No Jumper podcast, because it's just absolute asinine.
Oh, Lord.
And the podcast that branches off that at the end of the day with AD, T-Rail, and Lil House Phone. But and then there's a podcast for sports that has the only one I can remember the name of is Urinating Tree. He's a Steelers fan that covers sports in a very unique, creative way that I appreciate. But yeah, I don't really have any podcasts that I listen to regularly that really informs me too much. Just mainly stuff to listen to while I'm playing a game or doing research for this podcast. But I do listen to a lot of random philosophical readings and kind of mini documentaries on YouTube. I recently got into one about Bukowski, and also I think Sisyphus 55 does a very unique take on philosophy and the way he brings it out. And it's off of that I find these weird little rabbit holes to dig into and learn about, like Plato, Socrates, Diogenes, the modern Diogenes, the philosophy of the Unabomber. I've also taken a liking to a Twisted Minds channel on YouTube. They cover like serial killers and things like that, their life, the crimes they did, how they were caught. And then I want to say JCS Investigations. They do the interrogations for these people. But yeah, there's not too much that really informs me podcast or channel wise. I know it's kind of selfish, but I keep my podcast mainly like entertainment. But I've been branching off, and Bailey will send me things and I'll listen to them. And yeah, trying to branch off. But for the most part, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't like a lot of the mainstream podcasts that people blow each other over, like Joe Rogan.
Gotcha.
I can't stand him. Or I do sometimes, if I'm on a rabbit trail, I'll look up like podcasts that people have done with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not a big fan of Jordan Peterson, but I do think he has some insightful things about addiction. And so I would listen to the things he would have to say on that subject. And one that I would recommend for people who are struggling or just need to rethink addiction is his podcast interview with Theo Vaughn. Because Theo Vaughn has had addictions in the past, and Jordan Peterson has openly talked about his problem with alcohol in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the part of why I appreciate that is due to this podcast. And we may have differing viewpoints and we may disagree on some level, but there's still that common ground of you can still have something really poignant to say, even if I disagree with you.
Right.
Any for you, David?
Kind of same boat as you. The only one I listen to, and it's more for like tech news, cybersecurity news, stuff like that, is like Level 1 Tech's news they do. But it's like one dude is really kind of sort of libertarian, right leaning. One guy's in the middle, and female's kind of little democratic leaning, but it's focused on like tech news and leaks, kind of insight since they're in that industry working. Other than that, only heard about the only thing that's like philosophy standpoint, I guess, could recently influence. So I just like random YouTube videos going over like, say, Kant and stuff like that would be my textbook, Moral Philosophy of Reader, 4th edition, edited by Louis P. Pajman and Peter Trammell. If you like Socrates, there's a lot of Socrates. But
Cool.
yeah. And other than that, like YouTube channels, one I've gotten really into since I live near a nuclear site. A Cold War nuclear site is the YouTube channel The Cold War, because they go into kind of different countries and what they did throughout the Cold War, possible if it has like any lasting impact, the kind of cultural changes, and even sometimes delve into like religious history. Like I sent Bailey one about how the USSR handled Russian Orthodox and Islam and how they kind of failed miserably at that.
Yeah.
The only two other things that just popped in my mind was I've been getting into some of Wendigoon's stuff. What I do know about him is he is a practicing Christian, and what got me into him was the realistic portrayal of angels from the Bible. I think I might have sent this to Bailey. I can't remember. And he also just random like religious creepypasta shit. I'll sit there and listen to that shit for hours because the mind just reels. How did they come up with this?
Yeah.
And I feel bad because Bailey's about to show us both up with like 50 podcasts.
No, actually, I kept it trimmed down, but I'll mention YouTube channels as well as honorable mentions because I didn't do that, but or I didn't write them down at least ways. So I would say for religion, just to keep it trimmed down to 2, I would say Lord of Spirits is a good podcast. It's basically about biblical lore from an Orthodox perspective. But be prepared. Most of those episodes are like anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hours long, usually, kind of like our podcasts have gotten as of late. Totally not intentional, but it's happened, you know, as the show's gone on, we've brought out the episode lengths a little bit. But also the Ask NT Write Anything podcast is very good to kind of get answers from a both pastoral and a cultural / political perspective for those kinds of questions. For politics, I tend to oscillate between a few shows from the Daily Wire. Last year, my most listened to podcast was the Matt Walsh show, but he can be a little bit negative if you're listening to him every day. So by far, though, my favorite political podcast out there is Louder with Crowder. They're hilarious, politically incorrect, and highly knowledgeable. And now I'd also have to give honorable mentions to the Jordan B. Peterson podcast and the Areopagus. Jordan Peterson often has on interesting guests from various backgrounds that challenge my thinking, and he's also just very philosophically intriguing to me. The Areopagus is a podcast hosted by an Orthodox priest. It's the same one that's in Lord of Spirits, and a Protestant pastor, in which they discuss topics of religion and culture. And this is one of the first podcasts I actually had ever listened to, and really was kind of the inspiration for the concept of this show. So as far as podcasts, those are a few. With YouTube channels, I mentioned these last episode, but Gospel Simplicity and 10-Minute Bible Hour. Specifically, I like their church tours and interviews with pastors. Those also were largely influential when we did our series of touring churches and interviewing pastors. Also, people like William Lane Craig and Inspiring Philosophy on YouTube. I've referenced both of them a number of times in the earlier apologetics episodes because they were very influential on my thinking on a lot of spiritual topics, religious topics that, you know, kind of got me to the point where I can start asking theological questions, because they were very foundational in the realm of like, do I believe in God? Do I believe in Christianity? Just like your basic apologetics type stuff. So those are probably my main recommendations. Well, I think that's we're rounding it up. We're getting close to the end here. As we're getting towards the end, we're not quite there at the end yet. But as we're rounding it out, what do you have to say to the audience?
Well, man, it's been one hell of a journey, hasn't it?
Yeah,
We've all
yeah,
gone through this process and grown, and y'all listening have been along for it. And if you haven't, go back and follow this journey with us. It's been interesting, been controversial. There's been heated moments. There's been great bonding moments. Don't take anything for granted. Live life to the best of your ability. Stay humble, stay kind, show love to your fellow man. We are all imperfect. We all want to be heard. We all want to be safe. Create these conversations. Get out of your bubble. Explore other schools of thoughts, other denominations, traditions, religions. Learn the history and reasoning behind these things and the symbolism that they hold. Life is ever fleeting, and too many leave on unfinished terms. We're all more alike than we are different. And most importantly, don't stagnate as a person. Because before this past summer, fall, and this podcast, I was stagnating. I was stuck in a little rut, little bubble. You can come over it. Things aren't always as bad as they seem. Can persevere. Stay positive. And I hope you guys enjoyed this, man, because it's been a big part of our life for all of it. And I'm thankful for the knowledge that I've gained throughout it.
David?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, Michael really reflected a lot of, I guess, what we probably all feel. It's definitely been a fun ride with you guys. About the only thing I can say is my classic rule: don't be a dick.
Davidism 101.
Yeah.
What about you, Bailey?
Well, I would say first off, thank you for listening. I hope this show has given you a few things to think about, and that you will also take the time to do some introspection and to think about what you believe and why. And then my ultimate hope is that you will go out and have these conversations for yourself. That's the whole point of this podcast, to model how to have conversations, how to have hard conversations with people you care about.
And one last final thing. I would like to give a special thanks to everyone we've interviewed, everyone at the churches we went to, welcoming us with open arms, because we all three come from different schools than most of them. Thank you for sharing your knowledge of your church history for all the preachers. And thank you for reaching out, everyone that's sending questions. It's through the want for knowledge that we have ended up where we are. So special thanks to all you guys, everyone who's listened, all of that. Like, because if it wasn't for y'all, it would just be three dudes talking with each other in silence. So
Yeah.
thanks everyone that was involved in this production. Thank Bailey for 90% of the legwork, if not 99% of it. Thank David for saving my tech stupid ass a lot of the time, and Bailey as well. Like, I don't know what else to say, man.
Well, I think we're rounding it out, obviously. I don't know how to segue this nicely in a way that doesn't sound weird or dumb or forced. But
fuck it.
It's weird, man. It's weird. Like, I don't know. We've been doing this for a while, so it's kind of weird being like, okay, now we're getting there. What is your final message to your co-hosts?
Again, first of all, thank you guys for making this late night drunk convo in a hot ass room more than just a thought and an actual thing. And again, it's all thanks to you guys, because I'm just a dude with an opinion and a voice. That's it.
Hey, we
Second.
needed that opinion and voice and tangents.
Yeah,
made
but still, if it wasn't-
life more interesting.
Yeah.
second, you guys know I love you guys. Hope the best for you guys and all your future endeavors, whatever they may be. Hopefully, we can all still get together every once in a while and have these conversations, and we can take time to reminisce and learn from each other as we have, and we hopefully can continue to do that. I appreciate you guys putting up with my loud, inconsistent texting, confused self, and not cutting me out when y'all all fair well could have and would have been right to do. It's been one hell of a journey. A pleasure to embark with y'all on this. Watching y'all grow makes me proud, and no matter what, I'll remember this chapter of our lives fondly.
Oh, wow. That was beautiful.
I put a lot of thought into that, man. Like, it almost got me in tears over here. We're reaching the end of a chapter. It's emotional.
I know. Yeah. David, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, as Michael said, love you guys. It's been a fucking ride. And definitely, we all come out of this a different person. Hopefully, in long term, a better person. And yeah, and see where life takes us.
Well, I wanted to both of you, I want to say thank you for doing this show. I know it got pretty grueling at times, and there may have been a few moments where it was kind of all business between us, but obviously I'm thankful for your cooperation. Definitely continue to be open-minded enough to have more talks like these with others. Though this podcast is ending, I don't think we'll ever truly quit having these kinds of conversations. To Michael, I have watched you grow over the past year and a half. You have admitted many faults and put forth an honest effort to change them, and for that, I respect you and commend you. You have kept an open mind and have been willing to change, and I can't say that about most people. I love that you seem to be earnestly seeking the truth, and even though that you seem to be taking your precious time, I admire you for being intellectually honest in your search. If I could pinpoint any area for you to focus your search on, it would be the topic of the resurrection of Christ. The ultimatum Paul gave in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 14 is really true. Quote, if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain, end quote. So whether or not Christ was raised from the dead is the determining factor in whether or not Christianity is true. I wouldn't be here talking about this if I didn't believe that. I believe that Christ is risen, and because he is risen, our decisions matter and have eternal significance. There is meaning in life, and it can be found in the light of the risen Christ. I hope that one day you will come to the same conclusion. And David, you're wrong. Get out of my house, you filthy atheist.
You just give this real heartfelt thing to me. You're just like, David, get the fuck out of here.
Oh, that would be perfect.
But in all seriousness, no, I appreciate you having these conversations with us. It was once said that the mark of a great mind is someone who can entertain ideas that are not their own. And entertain them you did. For over 60 episodes and many, many hours. You went with us to a bunch of churches. You let me put your worldview through the ringer for an entire episode. And most importantly, you were willing to listen even though you disagree with me. And that means a lot. I still think you're wrong, and I pray that one day both of you guys become Christian. But for now, I'll have to settle with hoping that I put a few rocks in your shoes. And that's all I have for you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we're all over here like a little emotional.
I know. We've been doing
Bro,
this for so long.
It's about the end. We just poured out our hearts. Like, got a little a gangster tear, but a little tear pulling out.
Yeah.
No, it's just the pollen.
It's just the pollen.
Someone's cutting onions in this house, man.
I do have onions, but I haven't cut them. Anyway, well, I think that's about it. What are our final takeaways and closing remarks for the show? I know this might be a redundant question at this point, but this is our time to give our final thoughts on the entire show. So what are they, guys? What do you think?
Well, I'll be honest. The only thing I've wrote down is fuck, man, I don't know. But hear me out. Stay open-minded. Stay intellectually driven. Always have that thirst and that seeking for knowledge. Again, the mark of a great mind is being able to entertain other people ideas and worldviews that you don't agree or you don't personally partake in. I think that is a very great thing to bring up because we've all three done that. And it's through this podcast, hopefully you guys out there, whoever you may be listening, can have your own little mini Facing the Gates conversations. And it's through things like this that we can bridge the gaps that we have in modern times. Because it doesn't matter white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Martian, it doesn't matter. No matter what your worldview is, your religion, we're all human at the end of the day. We're all on this rock trying to figure our ways out. And it's better if we can converse openly, clearly, and be listened to. And I think that's kind of what I want to leave this off on. Just stay open-minded and listen to other people and be willing to converse and show everyone love and grace that we were shown throughout this whole show. And welcome people in with open arms and hear them out.
David?
Yeah. I mean, only thing I can add is something I've been kind of, for past 2 episodes, been kind of repeating. We're all more alike than people want us to think we are. And once you have those conversations, you either learn that or it gets kind of reiterated, more detailed. And because, I mean, we're in this world together. Why fight and try to kill each other when we can be more peaceful and be kind of more proper in that sense?
Well, I think this podcast has definitely been a snapshot in time for all of us. I think we're changing at such a rapid rate that we're definitely not the people we were when we began this show. And I think that's a good thing because no one should be content staying the same. You either grow or you stagnate. And the end of this podcast marks the end of an era in our lives. From here on out, we will continue to learn, listen, and grow. And I hope we've given people some things to think about. And I hope that people will have these conversations themselves. That's the only way we can move forward. And in that regard, the spirit of this show will live on.
From whence one flower falls, another shall grow.
There you go. For people at home wondering, we've talked about hopefully what's next and what we're going to be doing in our lives. But usually this is the part of the episode where I plug our social medias and our contact information and all that. Our social media at Facing the Gates on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, they will still exist. But after next week, when we make our final social posts, nothing will be posted to them anymore. So, it'll still be there if you'd like to follow us, but we're not going to be posting. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, even if you're listening to this a year from now, you can still email us at facingthegatespod@gmail.com. That's still going to be a contact source that is available. But obviously, we're not going to be doing the show anymore after this episode. And that's it. You guys got anything else?
And you guys can still rate us 5 stars.
Yes, of course. Maybe we'll get retroactively famous.
And you can still send questions or ask questions in the comments. Yeah. We might not check this every week, every 2 weeks, every month. We might not, but there's still that chance that we will, reach out and throw an answer your way. You never know. But really, none of us are on social media much, and hopefully we've given you the tools, especially in these past couple episodes, to kind of carry the flag and continue what we started.
Yeah.
And if we can help one person do it, I think we've done what we wanted to.
Definitely. Well, I don't have anything else. I'm about to give the last line. You guys got any final comments, or you ready to end it out?
My mind is blank because, as I said, for the last point, I just typed out final takes. Anyways, man, I don't know. So that whole
Michael's motto.
Yeah, the whole diatribe was
Wouldn't expect anything
Like,
less. Anything
yeah.
less.
Yeah, man, just keep learning, keep growing. Like, I know we hit that every episode. Like, seriously, that's the beauty of this. And appreciate what you have while you're doing it, because eventually it all has to end, and it's beautiful when it ends, but it's just the start of another chapter. And
Yeah.
that's where we're at.
Well,
You guys ready to close this page and start the new chapter?
I think so. David is dabbing. Wish that he weren't. This really makes this less sentimental, but whatever.
Got me. But yeah, love you guys.
Yeah, well, I would say as our concluding line here, thank you for listening. Memento mori. And until we see one another as we are facing the gates, adieu.